Good afternoon. This is Lisa Ramirez, founding partner of U.S. Immigration Law Group. I am really pleased that you're able to join us this afternoon for this important webinar. I know all of us are probably still adjusting to the new realities of the COVID-19 stay-at-home, remote working. We recognize the impact that this has had on so many people, our clients, potential clients, our community members, and also the economic impact in terms of people being laid off or furloughed and temporarily unemployed. So our hearts go out to all of you here at U.S. Immigration Law Group. We remain committed to protecting both the health and well-being of our staff and the public, and have not wavered in our commitment to providing exceptional professional services and our education forums. Those of you who know our firm, we are very committed to educating our community, our constituents, empowering them, equipping them. And I think there's really no better time to be able to do that. And we're grateful for all of the technologies and channels that are available to allow us to continue to connect with our community. So the information, I think we're all probably on information overload, and the information that's been made available with regards to the impact of COVID-19 on immigration, processing, and travel is constant. And so our hope this afternoon is to be able to provide a summary. And again, this is just a summary of kind of the most pressing impacts on immigration case processing and travel. And we feel that even if you or your loved one or a colleague or coworker may not be directly impacted at this time, or may not be in a position to move forward with an immigration case, I think it's just as important to be equipped with good information that you would be able to share and make available to others. So to that end, I want to go ahead and get started. To give you just a brief overview, we're going to talk about some federal agencies and the impact COVID-19 has had on those agencies. And then we're going to spend time talking about international travel and kind of the latest that's available as of today, which is Friday, March 27th. This is obviously a fluid time. It's changing constantly, so we can't encourage and emphasize enough the importance of you getting the most up-to-date information from the federal agencies themselves, whether on their website. And I would say in our world of immigration, when we're discussing the federal agencies that we're going to go over today, the best way to stay abreast is to follow them on Twitter. So this administration has kind of gotten us all on Twitter, and I feel it's absolutely essential for those of us impacted by these federal agencies to be following them on Twitter, because sometimes it is the only place that they update the latest information. So, all right. So I don't need to probably go over, but I think just there's a few points that I want to mention regarding the current climate that we're living in. So employers obviously have been forced to close operations, or they're making alternate work arrangements for employees. If there are any employers that are listening and have foreign workers or that are working on non-immigrant visas, or individuals that have employees on OPT, it's going to be really important that you seek immigration counsel in terms of how the COVID-19 impacts those petitions and those visas, because it can have impact, especially in circumstances when the visa is location specific, and amendments may need to be filed to correct or accommodate the current climate. As we know, in-person meetings and conferences have been canceled. Non-essential travel has been completely eliminated. Significant impact on our colleges and universities. This has a significant impact on our F1 and J1 students. Some of them have been required to go home to their home country, which will have longer term impacts on their eligibility for OPT or future education opportunities. Travel is being restricted domestically, and in many countries around the world, they are also restricting travel within their own borders. So sometimes we're only concerned in looking at, whether U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents can travel in and out of the U.S., but we also have to be looking and thinking and being educated about the external restrictions that may exist in other parts of the world. We have clients in a number of places that haven't been able to leave, that aren't able to come back, that they have very strong restrictions in certain parts of the world. So again, it's not just a matter of the travel within the U.S. or to and from the U.S., but within other countries and between other countries. All of our consular offices and embassies have been closed, which obviously has an impact on individuals, both U.S. citizens and non-U.S. citizens that are traveling abroad. So it's something to definitely keep in mind, especially if there are workers that may be abroad. They're going to be having some challenges if they haven't already in returning back to the United States, and we'll go over those things shortly. And I think, as I already mentioned, the foreign students may face challenges obtaining their practical training documents if they must leave the U.S. to complete their coursework online. So bottom line, the current climate is going to have a significant impact on everyone: U.S. citizens, lawful permanent residents, non-immigrant visa holders, foreign workers, visitors, students, etc. Okay, so let's talk about the operational impact. So first, just very broadly, generally speaking, about the Department of Homeland Security, you may have heard that on March 20th, DHS announced agreements with Canada and Mexico to restrict unnecessary travel across the borders shared with each country. And so we have heard of instances of individuals being questioned or denied entry because their travel was not considered essential. So it's something to definitely keep in mind. I don't want to mislead anyone. Our borders are not closed. However, they are being very selective, and they are scrutinizing the individuals that they are allowing enter into the country, and that goes both ways. The agreement went into effect on March 21st and will remain in effect for at least 30 days. That may be extended. So we have a lot of people in a position where, just to mention our border to the south, that may have family members there, whether elderly parents. Some of people are separated from their spouses or their minor children that are living abroad in Mexico, Central America, or other parts of the world. And one of the common questions that we've received is, whether they should go. They've had plans to travel, and they're concerned about, if they do travel, whether or not they're going to be allowed back in. And so that goes directly with some of the travel warnings that have been issued by the Department of State, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. But I would caution those individuals, especially, it doesn't matter if they're U.S. citizen, but any travel that takes place right now may obligate that individual to remain abroad, that they may not be able to come back into the United States, especially if this pandemic continues to increase and further restrictions are implemented. So just be very careful. And it goes the other way as well. We have many people who are here in the United States as tourists or for temporary reasons, and they are faced to make a choice whether they go back and try to pursue another avenue of reentering at some point in the future. And these, again, can be parents and spouses of U.S. citizens, and how long that will be before they'll be able to come back. And it's very difficult for us to be able to give that kind of precise advice, because honestly, nobody really knows how long it's going to take for our consulates and embassies to reopen, or our local, federal government agencies to reopen and operate under normal circumstances. So you just want to be very cautious of any travel international, whether you're departing or arriving to the U.S. So I want to talk very briefly about U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. So those of you who are not familiar with this agency, the Department of Homeland Security is basically divided up into three separate bureaus. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, which is tasked with the responsibility of processing domestic immigration petitions and applications here in the United States. There's also Customs and Border Protection that is responsible for our points of entry, our borders, our seaports, our airports. And then there's Immigration Customs Enforcement, which is the enforcement arm of the federal government. They're tasked with the investigation of our immigration laws and the apprehension and detention and deportation of individuals that are unlawfully present in the United States or have violated a law. USCIS, effective since March 18th, has suspended its in-person services at its field offices, at its asylum offices, at all of its application support centers as well. This is to go into effect through April 1st. So that means individuals that had adjustment interviews related to their citizenship application, asylum interviews, individuals have an application that are pending that require fingerprinting, biometrics appointments. All of those appointments will be, if not already, have been canceled. And again, that is through April 1st. USCIS has indicated that they will automatically reschedule the ASC appointments due to the office closure. However, if individuals had an InfoPass appointment pending during that period, March 18th to April 1st, the individual will be responsible for rescheduling those appointments through the USCIS contact center once the field offices are open to the public again. And then again, you just want to make sure that your local field office has been reopened before you reach out to the USCIS contact center. They will continue to provide very limited emergency services, and I do mean limited, and you do have to demonstrate the basis for the emergency, whether it's to issue a travel document because someone with a pending application has not received their travel permit but has an emergent reason to travel. So you'll have to go through the contact center, and they will determine whether or not the request necessitates that level of assistance. So at this time, to our knowledge, all of the service centers remain open, which means that individuals can continue to complete and submit applications and petitions. So I think what's going to happen is, although we can continue doing our work and submitting these requests for benefits in a timely manner, though many of those applications may not be approved if an interview is typically required or fingerprinting or biometrics is typically required. But nonetheless, we are seeing USCIS accepting those applications and petitions. They are issuing receipts in a timely manner. There is open communication. They continue to issue requests for evidence, notices of intent to deny, denial notices. So there's ongoing correspondence. So it's imperative that individuals keep in communication with their legal representative, with their attorney, DOJ accredited representative, to make sure that they don't miss any communication from USCIS. We just learned this morning, which I think is a great thing for many people, especially given individuals' inability to obtain evidence and documents, be able to deliver them in a timely manner to their legal representative. But all responses to requests for evidence or notices of intent to deny dated between March 1st and May 1st, so it's a 2-month period, those responses will be submitted within 60 calendar days after the response deadline. So it's essentially a 60-day extension on that RFE or NOID, the Notice of Intent to Deny deadline. So USCIS is going to wait until those 60 days have passed before they take any action in terms of adjudicating that application further. In addition, very recently, USCIS announced that it's going to accept electronically reproduced signatures on petitions and applications filed on or after March 21st. And again, that's another great policy that went into effect because it will allow individuals to be able to scan, to fax, to email these forms back to the individuals assisting them with the filings and without delay and the need for in-person contact. So I think that was a very significant shift that we're grateful for, instead of having to go back and forth, whether through mail or in-person delivery to obtain those wet ink signatures. Those of you who may not be familiar with employment-based processing, there used to be a premium processing option for employment-based immigration benefits. For those of you who care to know, that is no longer available. Premium processing essentially requires USCIS to adjudicate the petition. The employer petitioner pays like $1,410 for this extra service. But right now, USCIS has announced that they are suspending that service. So everyone is subject to the normal processing times. And I mention this only because it's really imperative that if there are any non-immigrant workers in the United States that are used to relying on the premium processing, because some of the processing times are so delayed, it may obligate them to file applications far well in advance of the timeframes than they're used to doing, 6 months, 8 months, sometimes in advance. So people cannot wait to the last minute, or they run the risk of falling out of status. One important other factor that I think is a hot topic that individuals may want to know, because there is a tremendous amount of concern about medical treatment being received and it being covered by government funds. And USCIS did announce very recently that any foreign national that is receiving medical treatment for COVID-19, this will not negatively impact their status or their case, and there will be no public charge assessment for doing so. So the only kind of catch-all is we'll see whether or not the agency will delay or defer the requirements at this time, but at least people know that they can still seek medical assistance and treatment for any COVID-19 symptoms. Before I go on, because this is a webinar, I want to make sure people are aware in the screen to the right, there is a drop-down menu under questions. If at any time while I'm speaking, you have a question about any of the topics that I'm covering, please feel free to type in your question and I will try to answer them in the order that they come in, and we'll also have a chance to answer any of those questions at the very end. But I just wanted to make you aware that there is that option available so we can have a conversation and have some interaction if there's any additional questions or information people are interested in receiving. Okay, Customs and Border Protection is another agency that I had mentioned, and it announced very recently that it is closing all of the trusted travel enrollment offices from March 19th until at least May 1st. So those of individuals that are affected by this change need to be aware that those offices are closed and are not going to be available to not going to be available to serve the public at this time. So that includes individuals that are used to like TSA pre-check from departures from U.S. airports, the Global Entry Program, people who are used to the Nexus program if they travel frequently from the U.S. and Canada, the Sentry program, for the truck drivers, the FAST program. So those are the kinds of programs that are essentially going to be closed to the public for people to be able to submit or process new applications or inquiries. ICE is Immigration Customs Enforcement, and as of March 18th, they decided that they're going to reprioritize their enforcement efforts. And I know that in the news recently, probably yesterday or the day before, the interim director of ICE has taken a lot of heat in shifting his position or priorities. And so we may see this changing in the near future. But right now, ICE has made an announcement that they're going to focus their removal operations on public safety risks and foreign nationals subject to mandatory detention based on criminal grounds. So we need to be clear that just because the COVID-19 stay-at-home policies are in place, ICE has not stopped its enforcement efforts. So they will, based on these priorities, continue to visit, to arrest and apprehend individuals in the United States unlawfully, but they're going to be focusing their efforts on a much narrower population. So again, those who pose a public safety risk, those who have serious criminal convictions as a part of their criminal history. They've also agreed that they're not going to conduct any enforcement efforts that are near any hospitals, healthcare facilities, medical clinics, etc. I think just to avoid people being deterred from seeking that medical help. I do want to point a few other matters. They're somewhat related to travel, but they do impact many immigrants in ICE custody right now. So we've received a number of calls as to people who have been waiting for their removal back to certain countries that they're not able to be deported. And so the important things to note here is that those individuals will remain in custody essentially indefinitely until some of these countries resume flights from the US. So Guatemala has resumed some flights from the US. That includes some people that are scheduled to be deported. El Salvador has suspended deportation flights from the US and Mexico. Honduras has also closed its borders to travelers and is not accepting deportation flights at this time. So just a couple of things to keep in mind. I know that there is a tremendous amount of concern nationally about COVID-19 outbreaks at the various immigration detention facilities. There are congressional members, there are community-based organizations that are trying to advocate for the humanitarian relief of individuals, especially the elderly, those that are sick, those that really should not be in custody at this time because of the health crisis that our world is facing. But as of right now, ICE has not agreed to any humanitarian release. They are considering requests on a case-by-case basis. So if you know of individuals that have severe medical conditions, are elderly, are in ICE custody, and they're not a danger to society in terms of being a public safety risk or have serious criminal offenses, it may be worth an effort to communicate with ICE to see if they would reconsider release at this time. And typically when ICE does grant release, it's either with bond or no bond, but they will be subject to an ankle bracelet for close monitoring. So it's not like people get off and there are not other more cost-effective and humane ways to ensure their cooperation with the court process or with the removal procedures. As far as our immigration courts is concerned, all non-detained hearings scheduled through April 10th have been postponed. So if you know of anybody that had a court hearing scheduled, whether it was for a master calendar or merits, the court has been making efforts to communicate with the attorney of record or the respondents directly. If you haven't received a phone call, but your court date falls within that time period, just know that all of the cases have been closed. You can look on the Department of Justice website. We included the link here so you know exactly what courts are open, which ones are closed. The courts that are tasked with processing detained cases do remain open. Filing deadlines must still be met. However, the courts have issued an announcement that if someone has a filing deadline, so maybe they did not have a court hearing, but they had a filing deadline within the time frame of prior to April 10th during this court closure period, the court is requiring that those filings be made by March 30th. and the Department of Justice website can give you additional details in terms of where to file those documents, which courts are open for filing, etc. So you're just going to definitely want to take a look at that and make sure that no filing deadlines are missed, because they do have irreparable consequences in certain cases. Those individuals that have the migration protocol hearings, that they have been also postponed, if any hearings, that includes both the masters and the merits, through April 10th. We'll have to wait and see if, in fact, those dates get extension. And as they do, we will do our best to keep our clients and constituents alert of those changes. Okay, now speaking in terms of international visa processing and travel. So some of you may already be aware that on March 18th, the Department of State suspended all routine visa services for an unknown duration, which essentially means all our U.S. consulates and embassies have been closed. Some of them remain open for very limited services for U.S. citizens. So it's important for you to be able to communicate with your embassy or consulate if you are in fact abroad. And it's really limited to those that require emergency travel. And I just want to, kind of maybe take a moment to just mention, it's just not a matter of understanding, what's open and what's closed, but really being able to appreciate what the impact is of these closures. So we have individuals, in fact, I had a call with someone just the day before yesterday, a veteran who's living in Panama with his fiance, has filed a fiance visa, which is still pending adjudication. The fiance is his sole and only caretaker, and he's desperate. He's desperate to come back to the United States to be with the rest of the family. However, there's no way for her to be able to come back with him. And I couldn't even provide a time frame when that might be possible, because we know that no visas will be processed by the Department of State through any U.S. consulate or embassy. So that includes non-immigrant visas, that includes immigrant visas. So for many people, they're really kind of faced with a choice as to whether they go abroad and basically stay abroad for some indefinite period of time, or they return to the United States without their loved one, whether it's their spouse, their fiance, or their children. Because for many people, they do require additional visa processing, and that's just not going to be a possibility. And we already know with the closure of the USCIS offices, the adjudication of those applications and petitions will be delayed, which will then only further the delay of those cases getting to the Department of State. And then once the Department of State reopens those embassies and consulate, there will be a significant backlog of case processing. So exactly how soon and how quickly the government's going to be able to move once everything is reopened is yet to be seen. So just understand that the closures do have significant impact on individuals and families and businesses and employers. U.S. passport operations are limited to life and death emergency travel needs only. So if you do not have an emergency need to travel, the U.S. State Department will not be processing passports at this time. The Department of State, I also mentioned earlier, issued a level 4 travel advisory that recommended all U.S. citizens, whether they live in the United States or abroad, to avoid international travel. It also advised U.S. citizens who are abroad with access to transportation to return home that they do so, or that they be prepared to remain abroad indefinitely. Again, I think we're going to, see soon enough a complete halt of airline travel. So please keep that in mind. And then any individual that's currently outside the United States and wishes to return or needs to travel outside the United States, they will be delayed or barred from obtaining visas or other travel documents and traveling. So again, just a note and a point to be prepared. I do want to mention a little bit about the European travel ban. We do get these questions from time to time. So it's important to note that any individual including U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents that are being permitted to return to the United States, that they are going to be directed to arrive in one of 13 airports. So they cannot arrive just in any airport, but it has to be one of the 13 designated airports that have COVID-19 screening procedures in place. Now, if they are not a U.S. citizen, a lawful permanent resident, or someone who's married to a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident, then there's essentially a complete travel ban for individuals from European countries. So that is across the board. That also includes individuals who have registered under the ESTA program, which is basically a program for European nationals to travel to the United States without a visa. So this travel ban, the proclamation that was issued, basically will penalize anyone who attempts to travel under ESTA and will have their ESTA privileges essentially revoked and canceled. So again, I think it's really important that with all these travel restrictions and concerns, that not only are we mindful of our kind of entries and departures or travel plans or rescheduling, but we also need to be mindful, especially if there's individuals on the phone that help other people process visa applications, or you know of people that have I-94s that may expire, or limited periods of time in which they're permitted to be in the United States, that we're looking at those expiration dates and the possible need to file an extension for those non-immigrant visa holders. So we have many clients right now that did not intend to apply for permanent residency, but they're parents of U.S. citizens or spouses of U.S. citizens that happen to be here now while this epidemic is taking place, that have essentially now decided to seek lawful permanent residency now rather than later in going through the consular processing. I feel, in my professional opinion, that the COVID-19 crisis is a completely legitimate reason why individuals would change their mind. Meaning that, you know, prior to the COVID-19 crisis, individuals who entered on a tourist visa, for example, and overstayed that visa and attempted to apply for a permanent residency, there would be a presumption of fraud, because the government would believe that the individual misrepresented themselves at that point of entry, and that their intention was really to immigrate and remain in the United States all along. So it is a basis if the government discovers or concludes fraud or finds fraud for an applicant, they can deny that lawful permanent residency. So for individuals that may have entered as tourists and have other options, either to file change of status, to file for adjustment of status, I personally don't have concerns at this point with this current crisis of being able to legitimately explain the change of strategy and direction. So just kind of keep that in mind as you work with and assist individuals in temporary statuses. Okay, other considerations due to COVID-19. We get a number of emails and phone calls, a tremendous amount of concern of foreign nationals, both lawful permanent residents and those on temporary, statuses, what the impact of receiving unemployment benefits would be. So it's important to just remember that for purposes of public charge, there is no impact for individuals applying for or receiving unemployment benefits. In fact, it's something that I encourage and believe anyone who's suffering economically, that they do so to be able to sustain and support their family and their own lives. And I also believe that it's something that could potentially help, because if someone has the intention of applying for permanent residency down the road, even if they received unemployment benefits, it will increase their income level to ensure that they do not fall below the federal poverty guidelines. Because when someone's income falls below the federal poverty guidelines, that in and of itself would raise a suspicion about that person becoming dependent on government benefits at some point in the future. So again, there's no reason not to collect unemployment benefits as far as immigration is concerned. Unemployment benefits are paid by employers through unemployment taxes that are collected by the government, but they are not government funded and they do not constitute a public benefit. So if you know of people having this question or this concern, please let them know, yes, 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 you can obtain and receive unemployment benefits. I do want to mention briefly, because I think it's important. It may not be relevant for some of you on this webinar, but if there's anybody who is an employer, someone works in HR, there are some businesses right now that continue to hire individuals. Their businesses are thriving just because of the nature of their service or their product. And so there are businesses that are hiring. And part of the thing, something that needs to be taken into consideration is the I-9 process. So everyone who is employed in the United States is required to complete a Form I-9 that basically validates the individual's employment authorization. So it gives the federal government assurances that everyone that the employer is hiring is authorized to work in the United States. Most everyone should be familiar with that form. Now, typically, that I-9 form needs to be completed within 3 business days after the employee begins work. And typically, the statutes and the regulations require that the employer has to review whatever documents that that employee or potential hire is providing in person. So whether it's a driver's license, a social security number, a birth certificate, employment authorization card, whatever document it is, the regulations require that that be done in person. Well, as a result of the COVID-19, Immigration Customs Enforcement has basically allowed for those businesses to inspect the documents remotely, right? So this can be done by video, by fax, by email, or some other method, which is a great indication. However, the employer does need to indicate that it was pursuant to COVID-19 in Section 2 as to the reason why the physical inspection is delayed. And the same thing goes for re-verification. So anyone that needs to be re-verified because their employment authorization document has expired, you can still follow those same remote review of those documents. But again, in that Section 3, you need to state that the basis for this remote viewing was because of COVID-19. So you're still going to be obligated, though, to physically inspect the original documents and to enter the date of inspection of the documents physically inspected within 3 business days after normal operations resume. So again, you're checking them still within 3 business days of the person beginning employment, and then you're going to have to go back and recheck them if you check them virtually at that point in time. Now, this doesn't apply to everyone. So the employers whose businesses are under normal operations, meaning you still have people coming in, like grocery stores, etc., then those need to be done in person from the get-go. It's really just to accommodate the business operations that have developed alternative workplace arrangements that the remote viewing is possible. So this rule basically will be in effect 60 days from the date of the notice, which will be May 19th, or 3 days after the COVID-19 kind of national emergency is terminated. So just be sure that you're paying attention to those timeframes and dates. Okay, I think I mentioned this already about that only applying to employers. The other thing I want to mention, this probably doesn't affect very many people on this call at all, but there are some employers that have been served of a notice of inspection. And so the ICE is actually giving an extension similar to USCIS of 60 days for employers that are subject to notice of inspections during March. which they have not received a response to yet, the employer will have an additional 60 days in which to submit a response. Those employers that they participate in E-Verify, some similar provisions are in place. There are some challenges that DHS is willing to extend some grace. So, for example, if the employer is unable to resolve a tentative non-confirmation because a public or a private office is closed, and so they can't resolve it, then that's going to be okay for a certain period of time until those offices reopen. So just keep that in mind as well. So in terms of resources, there are probably a lot of the resources that you're already aware of or thinking of. Obviously, the Center for Disease Control. We included the link to the State Department that will help you stay abreast of all the embassy and consulate information, the foreign quarantine policies, travel advisories, urgent health information, etc. And if you are planning on traveling abroad, or if you are abroad, then the State Department is highly encouraging travelers to enroll in their STEP program. It's the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program that will make it easier for them to locate individuals, to communicate with individuals in the event of an emergency. So whether it's a terrorist threat, a natural disaster, etc. We also encourage you to go on to the Department of Homeland Security's website, USCIS, ICE, the Consular Affairs website, and the Department of Justice Executive Office for Immigration Review, which is the immigration website. We didn't put all the Twitter handles on here as well, but you can easily find all of these agencies on Twitter. And like I said, it's probably the fastest way of keeping informed and abreast of changes. I also want to mention that our office, in partnership with Human Options and Ministry, as I said, we're still committed to keeping our education forums going. We will be hosting a Zoom webinar on Monday entitled "The Worst Times, Happy Smiles, Informing Members of Our Immigrant Communities About Their Rights and Methods of Self-Care During COVID-19. So my partner, Monica Crooms, will be hosting that webinar on Monday. We're really excited. We have a large number of community organizations that have already registered to join us. So if that is of interest to you, please join us. You're welcome to share the link that's on this PowerPoint with anyone that you think might be interested. The more the merrier. So, and then lastly is just our contact information. Oops, I just got out of, sorry. Is our contact information for our office. Again, we remain open. Our staff is working remotely. If there's any questions, issues, concerns, emergencies that you have, please give us a call, send us an email. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as well. So again, if you have any questions, this would be the time to type those in the chat box for me to be able to answer, and we'll try to get through those. So let's see here. The treatment. Okay, so the question that I have here is, you mentioned that treatment for COVID-19 will not be considered public charge. What about those who have lost their jobs and are wanting to apply for other benefits such as CalFresh for their citizen children? Okay, so I want to be very clear with regards to public charge, and we do have a public charge webinar available on our YouTube channel as well as our website. So if you want very great information and details about public charge, I encourage you to go there. But public charge only concerns individuals who are looking to apply for an immigrant benefit or lawful permanent residency status. It does not apply to U.S. citizens, so it includes individuals who may be undocumented but have U.S. citizen children. Their children are entitled to apply for any type of public assistance that they may need without any negative impact to the parent. Now, the thing to keep in mind with regards to that, and again, it depends on how close the parent is to apply for permanent residency as to whether or not there will have a kind of totality of the circumstances impact, because there are a number of factors that will be evaluated. And if the family is dependent on public benefits for support, the government could impute that to the individual applying for lawful permanent residency. It does not impact individuals that are applying for citizenship. It doesn't impact individuals who have or are applying for benefits pursuant to asylum status, refugee, U visa, Violence Against Women's Act, special immigrant juvenile status, TPS holders, none of those categories. So I think right now, if anybody has questions or doubts about applying for those benefits, please have them give us a call. But if they're receiving those benefits for those U.S. citizen children, and it's literally, a matter of them being able to make ends meet, I say by all means, please utilize those benefits. It's what they're there for. And we can always address, things later, should that be a problem or an issue. So yeah, and so again, with unemployment as well as benefits, we're in very challenging times right now. I know a lot of people are out of work, and so we really need to utilize the resources that are there for us in these difficult times. All right, are there any other questions? If there are not any other questions, then I will go ahead and end this webinar. If there's any topic that I didn't mention that you would like information on, please let us know, or you can always reach us via our website, email. We are continuing to conduct consultations, telephonic, televideo. Individuals can schedule appointments on our calendar online very easily and pay for those consultations. We can, work with people through WhatsApp, GoToMeeting, Zoom, Teams, any technological channel that we possibly can. In fact, we're trying to make it as easy as possible for our clients that may not be computer literate and having challenges with sending documents electronically. We have a way of getting pictures of those documents getting submitted to us via text. So we're really trying to do everything we possibly can to make it as easy as possible for those who need our services and who need our help during these difficult times. So since there are no other questions, I will go ahead and conclude this webinar. Again, I just want to thank you. Actually, let me just make sure. Hold on one second. I just realized I was stuck in this one question. Oh, hold on. I'm sorry. There is a couple more questions. Let me see. Okay, someone's asking about their DACA expiring. My DACA expires in December. Will I still be able to reapply, and if so, when? So DACA is a very sensitive topic right now. We also have an entire webinar with regards to the future of DACA that we recorded, I believe, in January because of the Supreme Court decision that we're waiting for. There is some pressure on, in fact, because of the COVID-19, for the Supreme Court to delay its ruling on the DACA case. I don't know if the Supreme Court will do so or not. So what USCIS has indicated is that individuals with DACA in the past have been able to file the renewal applications 150 days in advance. So if your DACA expires in December, we're talking about July would be the normal processing time. We're having many of our clients file sooner. And the reason for that is this, is not so much, that it's going to change the outcome of DACA, but it may allow them to have that DACA status for that additional 2 years, right? Because if the Supreme Court decides to terminate DACA, we won't know whether or not the federal government is going to allow those DACA recipients with employment authorization to just kind of to expire on their own, or if they're going to immediately cut off DACA, those work authorizations, and demand or require that those individuals return them back to the federal government. So again, it's up to you. I would say probably renew sooner than later, if need be, because that will ensure the possibility of you getting your DACA extended for a longer period of time. The DACA fees, if DACA does continue to exist, will be increasing. So it's also important to keep that in mind as well. There will be an application fee for the I-821D application, which there hasn't been in the past. So just be aware of that as well. Let me see the other questions. Okay, I think that is it. So again, thank you very much for joining us, and give us a call or shoot us an email if there's anything we can do to be of service. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.